Welcome back. I'm John Eldridge. We have been doing a series on the masculine journey that cover the stages that every man must go through in the story of his life. With me is Craig McConnell, Morgan Snyder, Bart Hansen, helping to unpack and to share our personal stories about what this looks like in a man's journey. My son Luke has recently taken up the unicycle. Like one tire, no handlebars, circus, unicycle. And he announces a couple of months ago that he's going to buy a unicycle and that he's saved up for it. He's going to, take it out of his own savings and he's going to buy this unicycle. And I'm thinking, waste of money. This is going to be another one of those, 2-week hobbies. He's going to get this thing. It's going to be frustrating, and it's going to wind up with a lot of other gear that is piled somewhere in the garage. Well, far from it. He has not only mastered the unicycle now, but within like a week, he's using it like a mountain bike.
Kidding.
He's going down trails, dirt trails and ridges, and he's riding it through the mountains, and he explains to me that actually what he bought was a Muni. It's a mountain biking unicycle. No handlebars, no brakes, one tire, a seat. That's it. That is classic boyhood. Mm. That is classic boyhood stuff. And then his brother, Blaine, came home this weekend. He'd been snowboarding and asked him how it went. Blaine says, "Oh, Dad, it was awesome. They went up in the mountains. I think they went to Vail." And he said, "We got off the slopes into the trees. And I was racing my buddy through the trees, and I'm thinking, you told your mom you wouldn't do this. They're crashing through the trees on their snowboards down this slope. And he says, you came out at the end, Dad, and you busted through these sort of snow-covered trees to realize that there was like a 10-foot drop. And we sail off this, and he says, it was epic." And I'm cracking up because I know that longing, that desire for adventure. If you've joined us for the first time this week on our podcast, what we're doing is going through the stages of the masculine journey. And last time we talked about the stage of the beloved son, which is about birth to age 12 in a boy's life and the desires and the needs and the wounds that stage comprises. This time we're going to talk about the stage of the cowboy. And I drew the idea from the life of King David, where he was a shepherd, but I think that shepherd sounds kind of wimpy these days. We think of the little figurines on the table at Christmas time. You're thinking the kid with a towel on his head and the
with
Christmas
a robe on.
Pageant. Yeah. Shepherd was a really rugged life. Nights alone out in the wild, and lessons to be learned that only hard work can teach you. The stage of the cowboy goes from about the age of 13 to around the age of 20. But you'll notice there's something that shifts in the boy's desires and his demeanor. There is a longing for adventure that really begins to show up. You see it in little boys, of course, but you see it in teenage boys. And this is what, the fast cars and the motorcycles and the loud music and all of that is about, this desire in the cowboy stage for adventure. Do you guys remember that?
Oh, yes. Oh, I remember 8th grade just aching to get out. And Boy Scouts was my out, my first 50-mile High Sierra backpack. And from that summer on, it was forget the Boy Scouts. It's me and a couple of buddies going up and just backpacking. Longest trip was, I think it was 21 days. I was 17, 16, one meal a day.
Holy cow.
And three of us, we just went into the mountains and just lived off fishing, the land, whatever we could scrounge.
Hey, you were a suburbs kid, so this isn't, you're not like a mountain kid here.
Well, as a little boy, we were up at the mountains at our cabin, so I loved the mountains. And the backpacking was, it was functional. I got out of my home, away from my folks.
And into adventure.
Oh, yeah. I remember, I think it was 8th grade, started hitchhiking. And I'd just get on the freeway, the intersection, and just go wherever I could go. A guy was going to Kansas City.
Oh, my God.
And,
That's great.
And I'd end up in Kansas City, 2 days later. And
my gosh.
turn around, hitchhike back. And just the adventure on the road.
Wow.
Craig, what were you thinking when you made the decision, I'm going out to the road to hitchhike?
Oh, it was adventure. I want to see the world. I want to go places. I was a little white, middle-class suburbia, Los Angeles.
Oh, first car. I remember my first car.
Yeah.
It's suddenly the horizon opens up, right? It's a 68 Volkswagen Squareback. And the first thing I did was we left Southern California and went to Montana. Me and a buddy of mine and my dog, going on an adventure, right? Going to see the world.
That's right.
Yeah. Speed comes to mind. And, I think that's something that catches the imagination of any boy. And I remember when we were raised in West Texas, and occasionally it would snow. And I remember we had a big snowstorm, and so we went and got a bunch of lumber and some 2x12s, made runners, and made this big long sled, and we tied it behind the car. Today you'd never do that. But we pull that thing around the neighborhood trying to, we'd turn the corner, you try to hit the curb, knock the guys off the sled. They go rolling up in the yards and so forth. But when the real adventure came was we came upon that thing one summer, and we didn't have anything to do, and we says, why don't we pull this thing on the dirt roads? So we go out on the dirt roads. We went to the Army-Navy store, and we got an old gas mask, and you put the gas mask on, put an Army coat on, and we tied this thing right up behind the bumper with about a 5-foot rope, and to see how fast we could get going on dirt roads with this thing.
Gosh.
And, we were at highways. I don't want to say how fast we were going, but it was – But that thing would come up off the ground.
Okay, pause. Mothers, women who are listening to this, it's a really important series that is going to give you a clue into the masculine soul. You have to let your sons adventure. This is so core to the heart of a boy, and a boy becoming a young man in these ages from about 12, 13 to 20. Adventure and that kind of thing goes through the roof, right?
John, I think of my mom. She's so safety conscious. But when I was a kid, my dad bought this boat. And we grew up in Pittsburgh, went to rural New York sometimes on the weekends. And I was 8, and we got this boat. And my dad said, "You're the captain." And he let me take the wheel. And he was right there, really close by. But from the day we had this boat, I was running it, and I remember that feeling of waiting for the boat to plane and catching speed and pushing down the throttle, and I was so into it, I wanted to take a course on navigating, and my mom is the one that recognized something, and so she went with me to this course. It was all mostly adults. I was the youngest one, but I learned this thing, and I remember my dad, he would do this thing, we called it catching the anchor, and he would try to catch the anchor to get us somewhere safe. He never let off enough line, and it was always back of the boat. And I learned that you throw the anchor off the bow, you give more line. And so I remember the day where I captained the boat and threw the anchor and showed my dad how to do it, and it was amazing. And just think of just as a boy that heart for adventure and to take the wheel of something.
The 7 C's.
Yes.
Oh, it's huge. Because here's the deal: in the stage of the beloved son, the question is, am I loved? Am I the apple of my Father's eye? Does he prize me? Am I delighted in? Does my Father adore me? That's what needs to be deeply addressed in the stage of the beloved son. In the stage of the cowboy, it's different. The stage of the cowboy, the question is, do I have what it takes? And it is the core question of the masculine journey, and most of what men are doing every day is looking for some kind of validation. It's deep in the fiber of a man's being, this yearning for validation. And part of it comes through adventure, right? Doing a 50-mile backpacking trip, holy cow. Yeah. A boy learns something about himself, right? He learns, hey, he's got what it takes to do that. And so part of the adventure is thrill, it's fun, it's adrenaline, it's all of that, which I think God gave to man. But part of it is searching for the answer to this question, right? That the adventuring tests you, and can you do it, right?
Yes. So true.
The answer to the question in the cowboy stage comes partly through adventure and partly through hard work. this is where a boy really does need to be shaped and honed. And I'm thinking of the story of David when he went to fight Goliath. You probably recall the story. He actually was sent by his father to simply check on his brothers, right? Israel's at war against the Philistines. David shows up, and everybody's scared to death because there's this mercenary, this giant of a man who's taunting the army, saying, hey, just send one guy out, and we'll do this thing, mano a mano, David says, I'll go. And everyone tries to talk him out of it. And so, Saul, the king, says, look, son, we really appreciate your enthusiasm. David's probably a teenager, probably about 16, 17 maybe. And he says, look, this guy's a trained killer. Appreciate your courage, young man, but don't do it. And David says, no. I have been a shepherd in the field watching my father's flock. And when a lion or a bear came and attacked the flock, I attacked the lion and the bear, and I rescued the sheep from their mouth. The God who helped me then will help me now. And you go, holy cow. I mean, David knew something about himself and about God that he had learned in this stage. He knows that he has what it takes. And he learned that through testing, through hard work, through challenges, trials, right? The lion and the bear. Whoa, You guys remember that? Was that a part of your teenage years?
I think for me, I made my life work through hard work. I felt I could win my dad's affirmation. So part of it was brokenness, but part of it was just the masculine heart. And so I would go out and try to find the hardest job I could find. I lied about my age to get on a demolition crew when I was 15 years old. And I got hurt a couple times that summer. But, I pushed through a whole lot of things, and, it taught me so much, and it built my confidence that I kept on with that. And so, hard work has been something during that stage of my life that was just part of my life. I look back on that with fondness because it did teach me a lot, and it did answer a lot of my question, and I did get a lot of confidence from that. But I had to find it pretty much on my own. And then I look back on it now and I see that there was a broken side of that was driving me in this direction. But, yeah, hard work was a big part of my life.
Craig, what about you?
Yeah, I spent a lot of time with my great-grandparents and my grandparents growing up. And I didn't naturally gravitate to hard work, but their work ethic was phenomenal, and it was always chores. I talk about being up at our cabin and running around and having fun. Well, that was after, 3-4 hours of raking pine needles, And it was just this work ethic that play came after work, and you worked hard before you played. And but I wasn't like you, Bart, running out looking for hard work, but I had to do it.
Yeah. My dad was good with tools. He was raised, you see, as a farm kid, right? And then he moved to the city, and he married a city gal. But he would work. He had a little workshop off the garage, and he'd do a lot of little wood projects and certainly home repairs and that kind of thing. And I really am grateful for that one piece. Kind of before his hardcore alcoholism set in, he taught me how to use tools, power saws, pipe wrenches, that kind of thing. And then when I went to my grandfather's ranch, I can still recall a very simple story that for some reason affected me very deeply. My grandfather was getting on in years, and so he would take a nap every afternoon. We'd go out in the morning, and we'd ride, and we'd check on the herd, or we'd throw out hay or check irrigation or whatever needed to be done. And then we'd come back and have lunch, and he'd take a nap. And so I'm kind of kicking around, I'm 17. I'm just dying, right, to do something, either adventure or work or something. He told me that when he was going to get up from his nap this one afternoon, we needed to go out and fix this stock tank. The valve on the stock tank was jammed, and it wasn't bringing water to the livestock. And so while he was sleeping, I went out and did it. And I just kind of tinkered with it and figured out what was wrong and installed the new valve. But what was the remarkable thing was his reaction. When he woke up and said, okay, let's go. And I said, well, we don't need to. I took care of it. He was blown away. as soon as he gets on the phone to my dad, to give him the update for the week, that's the story he tells him.
Right.
Answering the question, wow, son, you've got what it takes. Whoa, I am impressed with you, right? You amaze me. The way a boy gets the answer to the core question, right? So do you feel like that question got answered in your cowboy years? Do you feel like you're living now knowing that? I have what it takes.
I go back to that work thing, and I think that got answered in a lot of ways. I mean, John, what comes to mind for me is I used to change truck and tractor tires, and nothing gave me more satisfaction than to be sent out in a service truck and go out in the middle of a plowed field and jack a combine up and change the tire and get it back and get it going again. And driving off, to me, it's like I conquered the world. I mean, there was such self-satisfaction from that, and that I did that. I came out here, I had what it took to do all of that. I mean, there was just a lot of satisfaction for me in that.
John, answering that question, looking back, I think an outsider would observe my youth and young manhood as kind of typically normal. But for me to answer that question, I'd say at the time that question wasn't answered. I don't think that question was answered for me till much later in life.
Right.
Maybe in some small way, but not in a deep, profound way.
Yeah.
It just felt like I fit in. I was kind of normal, but it wasn't until later that I realized the importance of that question and how it hadn't been answered.
Yes. Yeah.
John, in my story, there was quite a bit of hard work. I'm thinking of a 15-year-old, I was a landscaper and then got a job dishwashing and felt this desire to heighten the stakes, and eventually started with a buddy in a car detailing business. And but it feels like nowadays in this season, the stakes are so much higher. I learned you can over-tighten a screw, and there's a certain way the wood grain goes. But even last night, I was sitting at the kitchen table after we got the kids to bed, and I'm sitting over all these papers of different financial packages for a mortgage, and I'm thinking about refinancing the house. And Sherry came down, and I could feel the frustration. She said, "How are you doing?" And I said, I know enough about mortgages to get me in trouble, but I don't really know exactly what the best deal is. And I'm making a 15-year, a 30-year decision.
Right.
And so part of me, I'm proud of the education I've given myself, and yet the predominant thing, the majority of me is still uncertain about that question.
Okay, see, that's the test, is that however we might interpret our past, how do you feel now as a man? I'm thinking especially of the guys who are listening, but women, you can look at your sons, your boyfriends, your husbands, and you can see this need for this question to get answered. Are you afraid? And where are you afraid in your life? Is it finances? Is it work? Is it talking to your 18-year-old daughter about the guy she's dating? Are you absolutely, utterly confident in every area of your life? Do you just approach everything with, hey, I got no problem with this. I love speaking in front of people. Never feel nervous about that. Love talking to my son about girls. Don't feel any problem about that. I love approaching my wife, and initiating difficult conversation with her. No problem about that. There is this doubt, this uncertainty that plagues every man, and because it's connected to this in the stage of the cowboy. And I would suggest that probably the deepest wounds a man takes are in the stage of the beloved son and the stage of the cowboy, where you don't know that you're loved and you don't know that you have what it takes. And this is where the offer of the Christian faith absolutely astounded me. As I was thinking through these stages and working on the book, The Way of the Wild Heart, which we just are about to re-release as Fathered by God. As I was working through all that, I was realizing, wait a second, God offers to be our Father. God offers love, and he offers validation. I mean, Jesus is baptized. Yeah. He comes up out of the water, and the Father says, I adore you, and you have what it takes. Right? You are my beloved son. He needs to hear that. And I am so proud of you. You are the real deal, right? In you, I am so pleased, and there's the core need. So the hope of the Christian faith is that we can turn toward God as Father and begin to experience a healing and a redemption and a fathering, whether we're 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80
Right.
in this. It doesn't matter what age you are. These stages still have to be healed and established and completed in our life so that we can move on in the calling that God has for us. Thanks for listening to this week's podcast. We hope you loved it. We love getting your feedback as well. If you're enjoying these podcasts and would like to leave us a comment, please visit the iTunes store and do so. And by the way, all of our audio resources are now available for purchase through the iTunes store. You can find our resources and our other podcasts by searching for either Ransomed Heart or John Eldredge on the iTunes store. And to find out more about Ransomed Heart, our podcast, our events, and all of the things that we're offering and doing, come to our website at www.ransomedheart.com.